Firstly, I'm going to introduce this amazing woman here. And she doesn't need any introduction, really, but I'm going to introduce her and I'm going to tell you why Moana's here. So I'm going to take all the credit, but this is my idea, so I hope it works out. But the wonderful, wonderful Mary Biggs, who's, as all of you know, I know. The wonderful, wonderful Mary Biggs, taking a bow. Mary said to me, who do you want to interview? And honestly, that's what I said. This. Now, we have never met before today, so never.
Excuse me, I'd like to correct you.
Oh, shit.
Okay. Once I was walking down Lambton Quay, and I was walking up it, and she was walking down it, and she went, hello, and I went, oh my God, Linda Clark. She goes, oh, Moana. I went, hello, I got to go. That was it. That was a moment. Honestly, you had to be there. We almost weren't there.
That is true, actually. I don't regard that as a meeting. But we did have a passing moment in Lambton Quay. But we've never met each other. When Twitter, or X is formerly known as Twitter, was a sort of decent community, we introduced ourselves to each other through DM, and we'd have the odd conversation. And it was always, I don't know, it was mutually, we like each other, right? We liked each other's work, and there was mutual respect. And I just think that Moana is amazing. So. This is why we're having this conversation. So for those of you that don't know a little bit more about Moana, I'm going to have to put my glasses on because I've made notes. This woman is a shapeshifter, and that's why I want to talk to her. That's why I think that she's really fascinating. She started out studying law, something we've got in common. Most of you will know her not because she turned out to be a terrific lawyer, because actually she turned out to be a terrific singer and musician. And in 1986, she debuted as a solo artist with a song that was produced by Delvanius Prime, which is like not a bad mentor to have. Not long after that, she formed Moana and the Moa Hunters, which was an absolutely pioneering band in New Zealand music for the way that Moana and her team incorporated te reo and really championed te reo. And it's so easy to say that now in 2024, but way back then, we won't even go into the dates because we're about the same age and it's embarrassing. But back then, that was phenomenally radical. She had a follow-up band, which was Moana and the Tribe. That band was huge on the international festival circuit. She's picked up international awards, New Zealand awards, Art Laureate awards, inducted into the New Zealand Music Hall of Fame. So that is enough of a career for any one person. But then she switched it up. She'd been making documentaries anyway, but she's had this phenomenal second wave, if you like. And now Moana is an award-winning current affairs television interviewer, and her program Te Ao with Moana, which airs on Māori television on Monday nights at 8 o'clock, but you can find it in other places too, is just a slayingly good current affairs show that, some of you may never have heard of or have never have watched, but we can fix that now because it really is worth watching. So please welcome Moana.
Yeah. Oh, kia ora, kia ora. Thank you, Linda, for that lovely introduction. And I just want to acknowledge the wonderful performers that took the stage before us. It was really uplifting and celebratory and insightful, so thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Featherston. I love it. I love my room at the Royal. I like the people. The cheese is cool. Food is nice, and I've got cool company. And she's quite flash, eh? She is like really flash. I used to watch her on telly. Yeah. I'm a bit worried about this. Okay, go on, hit me.
Right, let's start. When I said apart from saying that I think you're a shapeshifter, the thing about you that I think is fascinating and is of our time is that you are what I would say is a cultural translator. So you're somebody who operates in both the Pākehā world and the Māori world with equal ease and grace. That's how it looks like from the outside. Do you have a sense of that when you go about your business?
I just try and be useful, and whether it's music or documentary making or journalism or whatever, to me they're all the same. Like, I know people think, oh yeah, you went from that to that and that. I don't think I think they're all exactly the same, because we're talking the same stuff, just a different way of doing it. And when I first started in music, my songs were designed specifically for Māori, because we never heard ourselves, we never saw ourselves. So we'd do our music videos, I'm like, okay, give me a kōrero, Jesus, chuck a feather in my head. I want to look the whole part, right? Because we do not see ourselves. And then our songs will have te reo in it, it'll be about social justice and all that. So those were aimed specifically at our people to kind of uplift, reinforce, mobilise. And as I mentioned today, all our mates were doing things in their spaces, like our educators, our health workers, our lawyers, so we're the platoon. And then over the years, it's kind of, well, our people are, mobilising, getting up. Now we need to. I think it was pretty crappy there for a while, where people would say, you're too Māori. It's too Māori. Oh no. So we went off overseas, and they go, oh, you're not Māori enough. Honestly, what the hell? And so we'd go to all these countries, and we go, okay, right, let's blend everything together, haka, tongapuro, whatever. So then we became, as I like to say, globally hot, even though locally not. And then we go to these different places and we say, oh, how are these Russians going to receive us? How are these people from Vanuatu? What about these people in Switzerland at the Montreux Jazz Festival? And then you realise that actually the values and the stories that you're talking about, they land with them. And for some people, I remember the German fans would come up and go, you're weak and no, I've got a Russian accent there, that's the wrong one. You'll make my German heart come to life. And I'm like, oh, okay. You'll make me think of my grandparents. I'm like, oh, that's so lovely, So then you're reaching out, you're connecting. And it's just incredible. Liz and I were just talking about the soft power of arts to build relationships, build diplomacy. And so, I'd go overseas, and then I'd find, because it'd be hard yakka back here, Tommy and them fighting, everybody fighting in their space. And then you go overseas and then you see that Māori game changers, leaders. You go up to the Arctic. I went up there, got off a plane, thought, I'm going to be the first Māori anyone's ever heard of up here. They go, do you know Timoti Karetu? I'm like, what the hell? You want to come and see our kohanga reo? I said, what? They have a bloody kohanga reo in a little village 800k into the Arctic Circle, inspired by our lot. When we went and played in Russia, a few weeks later, the New Zealand ambassador rang us up and goes, oh, Moana, you need to come back. I went, what? He goes, they want to learn they want to learn Maori at the University of Humanities in Moscow. What are you talking about? They got inspired. You got to come back. So for 2 years, they're bloody Russians learning Māori in Moscow. I mean, this is ridiculous. But yeah, cross-cultural. I mean, I suppose so.
I suppose so. Let's go back a step. So you were starting out as a studying law.
Yes.
So did you go to university thinking, geez, I'm going to be a lawyer?
I thought I'd go to university and colour up the system. They get more Māori in there, and then everything will be honky-dory, okay? And then I realised, actually, the system sucked. So getting more Māori in there wasn't going to change it if you didn't transform the system. So there was a little bit of a stink moment when you're like in, year 3 and you're going, I don't know about this now, because their mum and dad were so pleased, you know, he's going to be a lawyer. And then, I just became more justice focused.
You said that this afternoon, actually.
Yeah.
That realisation in conversations at law school that the law and justice are not the same.
Not necessarily the same. The law was used as a tool of colonisation. You know, Public Works Act, native courts, and everything that I learnt, even when I was doing my documentary series, The Negotiators, about treaty settlements, you just saw how the law was it was just shocking. Like any New Zealander watching those docos and learning about treaty settlements and how predetermined the framework is for negotiation, how little you can get back, and just the atrocious historical accounts behind that, you know, where some tribes even, part of a treaty settlement is that the Crown will apologise. And I know one tribe that said, we don't want your apology. And the Crown goes, well, if you don't take our apology, you're not getting a settlement. I mean, it's crazy. So, yeah, justice and law were challenging. And I think we're in interesting times now. I mean, I wonder when you were at university studying law, how much of, you know, the treaty were you taught? What did you learn about the treaty when you were at uni?
Well, I think it's different that if I'd done my law degree when I was a young person, like when I first came out of school, I think I would have learned nothing, because that's a long time ago. But when I did my law degree, when I studied for my law degree, I was 40. And so that's still quite a long time ago. But we there were papers on Māori land, papers on Māori law, the treaty was taught. And by that stage, the state-owned enterprises case and the Māori lands cases were well established, and there was a whole body of work to study, a whole body of case law to study. So there was quite a lot of attention. But I mean, the classes were white, right? The classes are still white. I mean, this week just gone, I've just done the interviews for, you know, in law firms we have the summer clerk system. So all the big firms do it, and we get about 500 applicants, which is horrific. And we take about, you know, between 10 and 18 of these amazing young people. And we are, you know, we're trying hard to increase the number of Māori and Pacifica students coming through that pipeline, but it is really tough because it's tough. In the first instance, I think lots of them don't even apply, right? They don't apply for the big firms because probably they just don't think they'll make it, or whatever else, there's complicated reasons. But yeah, I mean, our firm is white, you know. Please don't tell them I said that. But
I think it's just a fact.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. And wherever you go, you know, so many things about the law. That's one of the things that surprised me when I came into the law as a grown-up, is that one of the reasons I went to the law is that I'd interviewed so many lawyers over the years, and they were always really interesting, really, really interesting people. And when I was thinking about what else to do, I was really influenced by the fact that if I sort of did a list of who were the most interesting people, artists are really interesting, but that you do need a bit of core talent to have that as a goal. So that was off the list. But the law thing, I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. And they were really interesting. But when I actually got into the law and got into the, you know, my first firm, now I'm working for a partner in another firm, but you get into the firms and actually the power to be the same as they always were is still really strong. So there's not enough women make it into partnership, and most of the partners are male and white, and that's the nature of the profession. It's not our firm, it's all firms.
You know, I remember one class, legal ethics, which I thought was really interesting, because I'd go, what if the person you're defending, you know they did it? And they'd go, doesn't matter. I'm like, oh, really? Now, no, it's up to the other side to prove it or whatever, you know.
Everyone deserves a defence.
Yes. And then also the notion that the law is this neutral, values-free thing, which is just such a load of rubbish. It's not. And, you hear this guy, the KFC dude, what's his name? This guy, this Casey, the Casey King's Council, not KFC, yeah. I actually think he is though, eh?
You totally lost me there.
Yeah, he's a little bit cooked, I think. He says that there's no place for tikanga in the law. I'm thinking, hello, person that walks around with a bloody wig on that goes, yes, Your Honour, no, Your Honour, I mean, it's all about English tikanga, But then for years, people like Moana Jackson have been saying we need to be able to, we could be more imaginative, more creative. We could create different ways of resolving issues. We could have, instead of an adversarial approach, we could have a consensual kind of a collaborative way of, restoring the balance. But yeah, it's quite interesting how some things are just sort of taken for granted, like the law is neutral. And that's the other thing about journalists. It's like journalists have to be neutral and objective. I mean, what does that mean if you're living and breathing and walking around?
Well, journalists...
How can you be that?
Yeah, I never thought journalism was objective. I think you try your best to be balanced and you have to be accurate. That was the two guiding stars. But I can remember when I worked on, a lot has changed in journalism, and we'll come to your kind of journalism in a minute because I think it's really different. But so a lot has changed in journalism and some things have remained the same. So one of the things that used to really pull my string when I worked for One News, and which I did for quite a long time, is that we led a lot of bulletins with stories about the impact on mortgage repayments, and that the value of that as a story on any given day, when people are struggling and there's a whole bunch of other stories that are very pressing and people's lives are difficult. But the fact that mortgages going up would lead the bulletin night after night after night. This is in the 1990s, and which had some similarities to where we are now. But night after night after night. And no one in the newsroom was prepared to admit that the reason that story led the bulletin is that our newsroom was dominated by wealthy people with big mortgages. So yeah, they had a really big vested interest in that story. So they chased that story down. They wanted to understand everything about it. But other stories that would be just as valid, and say, for example, a story like just endemic homelessness, which, we've never been able to solve, they don't have, journalists don't have the same life experience of that. And therefore, they see that, with a bit of distance. And I always really loved, I was a very, very big fan of Celia Lashley. And I always remembered, I did a thing with Celia, and she was explaining why people who are really poor make really bad decisions. And she described it this way. She said, when you've got a lot of money, or even when you've just got a comfortable amount of money, and really bad things happen, like your car breaks down, or your roof is leaking, or you've got an emergency bill or whatever. But these bad things, these everyday bad things, when you have a comfortable amount of money, those things happen, and they're kind of out here. So you've got this between here, crisis, and here, you've got quite a lot of runway, right? But if you've got no money and you're really down on your luck, and one of those things happen, your runway is right here. So you're going to make bad decisions because you just don't have enough space to get the decision right. And I think the same thing happens with news judgment. If it's something that's in your life, and you look at news coverage all the time, if it's something that affects journalists personally, then the story tends to get this much, it's this interesting. And if the story or the subject is something that they've got no life experience about, and newsrooms are not diverse by and large, then the story has this much, because it's, yeah.
I was just thinking that, I had a young relative up with me who's 15, and him and his brother love school. They love it. Anyway, I said, how's school? He goes, I haven't been to school for a while. I went, what? What do you mean? Oh, the car broke down. And so we couldn't get to school because they live, about say 15 kilometres away from their school. So their car breaks down, and I go, well, what about a bus? Oh, well, that would cost $30 for both of us, you see? And then you start, so the kid left, they hadn't gone to school for the last week of the term. Now, you know, according to some ministers, those parents should be fined, eh? You know? It's just bloody ridiculous. And so it's these practical, tangible things through no fault of the parents who are living, you know, with a limited income, that's what happens, and that's a consequence. Not that they're neglectful parents and whatever, but that's that runway you're talking about. But also that fair, balanced and accurate thing, that's what they told me when I got into journalism 5 years ago, because I said, I never had any training. I'm like, what the heck, you know? What's the rules? They said, you've got to be fair, balanced and accurate. I'm like, okay. You know what? It's not very fair, balanced and accurate out there, though. The world is not fair to Māori. It's not balanced. So how does that work? Because, you know, we'd have to, oh, here's the Māori view, and then someone go, oh, you need the Pākehā view. Or here's the, and I'm like, well, why? That's everywhere. That's everywhere. Why do we have to balance it up? They don't balance our bit up. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent.
No, but your interviewing technique is really interesting to me. Like, I think you're a great interviewer. And you and I couldn't be more different interviewers if you, you know, there's a bell curve and people go like this, right? And Moana's down here and I'm down here. And there's a whole lot of sort of mushy people in the middle. But the thing about your interviewing technique, which I think is so interesting, and which if you haven't watched the show, I really encourage you to watch it, is because you are so respectful and kind of quiet with the talent, right? You might be burning up inside thinking all of the things you've just said to us, but when you conduct the interview, you're mostly the people that you're interviewing, if they're politicians, my interpretation is that they underestimate you, right? They come in and think, oh yeah, this is the singer. And then you're quite gentle at the start, but it's surgically, I mean, by the end of it, they're on the tray. And they're
very kind.
And they're in pieces. But always in a loving way.
I had to interview David Seymour and Winston Peters on the same day, 45 minutes apart at Eden Park. I drank an entire bottle of Chardonnay that night, I'm not ashamed to say. And a word was they weren't that fond of each other, so we're trying not to make them crash into each other along the way. But I remember one of my interviews with David, who always agrees for an interview, that after it went to television, my ex-husband said, you looked like a psycho. And my son said...
Can we just pause there and just remind everyone that was Willie Jackson?
You look psychotic. I said, did I? And my son goes, Mum, you look so grumpy. You know, and I said to the editor, couldn't you find bits of me going? He said, we only had one shot. That was right at the start. You know, I find that, so I don't know what it was like for you, because you hear this stuff and you think, did you just say that? Did you just say that addressing Māori inequities somehow is like on the road to apartheid? Did you just say that? Oh, yes, that's where we're going to go, you know. I mean, how did you handle politicians when, I mean, did you do the grumpy face or what?
Look at it. It's always grumpy. I do not have a face for television, and I'm telling you this because that is what my boss in television said to me.
Oh my God, what a wanker.
His name was Sean Brown, so let's just shame him now. But he said to me in the early days, you don't have a face for television. And you know, he was sort of right, but I don't give a fuck. So but I think that they were different days. It was a long time ago, and it's changed in some ways. It has. The thing about being a political journalist, and ultimately one of the reasons why I stopped doing it, is that, and why I think, it was a great thing to do in your 30s, right? Because it's just you're sort of at your, well, maybe it was just me, but you're sort of at your angry prime. You're fit, you're, ready for anything, kind of like bring it on. And whereas now I think I'd struggle, I think I'm not that interested in skewering people anymore. Like I can see that doesn't get us anywhere. And in fact, what I think we did in the 90s in journalism is that we set in place some of the paving stones that have been the base of some really negative ways of covering stuff. So we weren't really gotcha journalists because we had longer stories and we covered more politics, but we began that path to gotcha journalism. And ultimately that doesn't really help us with debates, right? It doesn't help us with, which is where we came in terms of your ability to talk on both sides. When I left the press gallery, I really felt that I was pretty feral. So, you kind of hone your skills. You're doing a lot of interviews every day with politicians. I was very hardworking, very dogged, read everything. But, you'd see you would see them coming towards you on the tiles and you'd just think, really, meat. And I led my team, and I trained Duncan Garner and Charlotte Glennie and a whole bunch of others, but they were two superstars coming through. And when they came to us as Duncan Garner came to me as he wanted to be a sports journalist, but he made the mistake of he turned up and he asked into the sports department, and he was sort of bubbly and kind of 10, and he made the mistake of asking a question about politics. I think he just wanted to sort of suck up to me. And I was like, right, interest, and you come. So he came to us. But my whole thing with them was, we're Television New Zealand, we're big, and we dominate everything. So I do not want to ever hear the audio of a media conference and hear Barry Soper or TV3 or anyone else ask the first question. We asked the first question. And, TVNZ doesn't run it like that now, which is a good thing. But we were very aggressive, and politicians were terrified of us. And we sort of thought that was quite a good thing. And now I reflect on that and think that was pretty immature. But also the whole nature of debate has changed. And that would, honestly, I can't even imagine what my inbox would be like if I was operating like that now. You must get it, right? You must get it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Māori media is it was set up after Waitangi Tribunal claims about the language and court cases and everything. So it's set up to save the language. So isn't that lovely? You get the people whose language is stolen, got to do all the hard work to bring the blooming thing back. Okay? So that's the first thing. And then with journalists and news media, Māori media, we're to spend half the time trying to clean up the mess that everybody else had done in the other media. These stink sound bites and headlines that catastrophised things about Māori or one-dimensional representations of Māori. Tami was a classic case of being, misrepresented as a bloody terrorist. The story of gangs, the story of street people, all being one-dimensional as if they just popped out of nowhere. All of us who were putting our hands up and saying stuff, we're all labelled radicals and activists if you weren't a terrorist. So, this is the legacy of some of that media. It's changed now. There's been some, diversity in the rooms and a lot of people thinking about it, but there's still that the challenge for us. So for Māori media, we might come across as softer, but what we're trying to do is not necessarily hit the headline or get the soundbite. why I'm so bloody obsessed with this stupid job that I ended up at this time in my life, that, you know, is the most intense thing I've ever done. And I've played around the world and got up on stage to thousands and thousands of people. And I cannot believe how obsessed and how intense this kind of work is, because it is an absolute privilege to have a platform. And I don't think a lot of people actually realise what a privilege it is. So for Māori to have a bloomin' platform to actually tell our stories, to do our investigations, to help people join the dots, it is such a huge responsibility. You know, even a couple of weeks ago when we did a story on Gaza, it was honestly, you were just up till 2 a.m, then waking up going, did I get that number right? Did I get that number right? I forgot that stat, that image. And that's not even a Māori story, but that's the kind of the environment that we're in. So we spend a lot of time talking and listening, you know, and the kind of interviews where people interrupt drives me nuts. I want to hear what Winston says. And then I'm going to say, what are you talking about? Oh, you know, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We're not going to buy into that. I said, you don't buy into it. It's a declaration. You know this because you're a former Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he's like, oh. Well, anyway, you know, women, they don't want to go into the women's toilets now because, you know, I'm like, what? He said, I've had letters, Moana, letters, you know. This trans thing, I'm like, I have all the women in the world, not one has ever raised that as an issue. You haven't been listening, Moana. I mean, honestly, send love, prayers and Chardonnay, because it's hard yakka. So, but what we try and do is like, okay, David, have your bit, and I'm trying not to look grumpy. And, so the evidence suggests that blah, 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 blah. And then they do the duck and dive, which is what I wanted to ask you, is like, when they've got all these little wee tricks, that's what they get trained. They get trained. So they have these tricks. So you might catch them out and they'll talk about some completely different subject. And you go, hang on. Oh, I know, because I said to David Seymour, something about the voice to the Indigenous part, you know, voice to Australia, Parliament. I said, oh, it failed. Wasn't that terrible? He goes, no, it was good. I said, why? How can you say that? Well, you know, nothing should be determined by race, says the person that's obsessed with it. And then I go something about the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And he goes, well, what has that ever done for you? I go, well, it's recognised that Indigenous people have collective rights. He goes, but what about potholes? I kid you not. I said, what? What the heck's that got to do with potholes? Do you see what I mean? You see how traumatising this experience is? So how did you prepare for talking to people like that?
Well, you've got to read. Like, you've just got to read. You have to read everything. You have to, if you're going to interview, I had to interview Helen Clark a million times until she blacklisted me and stopped talking to me entirely for a year, which I think was a relief for both of us, frankly. But if you're going to interview somebody like Clark, you've just got to do your homework. And I think that's the thing that makes it such a hard job, actually, is that to be good at journalism, you need to know as much as you can about the subject you're going to interview the person about. 9 times out of 10, you know, politicians will be struggling to be on top of their brief, mainly because, like everybody else, you know, they've just got so much incoming. And so stuff is just coming at them from all over the place. And that's why you want to get in quickly, right? That's why you want to get in That's why you want to be the first person that does the interview or get the first question in, because you want to sort of dislodge any sense of cockiness that they have, that they understand what they're talking about. Like, you kind of want to niggle in.
But you see, like, you can spend all your time researching. Now, I'm a researchaholic. I will spend all night read. I've got a million questions. My son, who's my boss, added trauma, he goes, Mum, you only need like 6-8 questions. Cameron Bennett, who's a seasoned journalist, he goes, you only need a few questions. I stay up all night. I've got 24 questions. What the hell?
But that's why you're good. That is why you're great. Because you actually, you only need maybe 4 or 5 questions that will actually go to air. But to set the trap and get them to walk into it, you sometimes need 24 questions.
But do you do the hard question first, or do you work your way to it?
It depends. So if you were interviewing someone, this is a real
problem.
If you're interviewing, say you're in Parliament, which you luckily don't have to do, but in Parliament when you see the journalists on what's called the tiles, that black and white tiles thing, you see it all the time on the news, you've got about a minute and a half. Like, you kind of need to get their attention, because actually they can just keep walking past you. And to be
That's quite hard, your job.
To be honest, if you were a politician, wouldn't you just walk on?
Yeah.
Like, I would be walking on. I would not be stopping. I would be saying, I'm busy, gosh, busy, and off I go, which some
We're
of them
at the fire exit, eh?
Yeah. So if it's in that case, you really need to do 2 things. One, you need to get your physical presence in front of their face. And I was very good at that, because I was a lot thinner then, and I could get into any crack. So, yeah. So they're coming towards you, and it's a crowd and da-da-da, and I'm like, I'm in like a dart. And before they've got to the doors where they go past, like, their nightmare has arrived. Here she is, right in their face. And that's an art form, and you have to teach young journalists to physically impose themselves into the space. But if you're doing an interview...
that's funny, because I was at the Labour Party headquarters on the election night for Māori television. They said, can you go and do the reporting? I said, I've never been a reporter. I don't know what to do. Anyway, so I was trying to, they cut to you and you go, I'm at the Labour headquarters, and yes, we're waiting for Chris Hipkins, and I just met Ginny Anderson, and she said, blah, blah, I'm like, God, hurry up, Anyway, then they go, there's all these cameras, all these different flash blimmin' journos there, and they go, Chris Hipkins, he's arrived. And the guy that was directing me goes, Moana, go out there, rush out there with your microphone, shove it in his face and go, how does he feel? I said, I am so not doing that. I just got it. What the hell?
Oh, but it's quite good fun. I mean, honestly, this is why I had to get out, because I didn't have children when I was a political reporter. And, I wanted to be a good mother and loving and kind. And I just, it would be too hard, because you're literally hunting them down all day. And then, you walk in the door, darling, lovely. No, too hard. But I think...
Who was your first interview that you ever did?
Oh, I'll tell you, this is funny. So I worked in print in newspapers first, and it was my second job, actually, when I first came to Wellington. And I worked for the Manipoto Evening Standard first, which we called the Manipoto Evening Substandard. It was pretty terrible. And then I got sacked, actually. Anyway, that ended after 9 months, and I got a job in Wellington at a paper which no longer exists, called the New Zealand Times. And my first week in the New Zealand, and that's when I thought I'd really made it, because I was in Wellington and had a big paper. And my first thing I had to do was go and see lovely Ken Douglas at the, I think it was the Federation of Labour in those days. And I've always got a really soft spot for him, because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was just I literally knew nothing about anything. And I walked into his office, and it was in Trades Hall, and it was a big old office, and he's a big burly guy. He was at his biggest at that stage, and he's sitting behind the big wooden desk, and I come in and sit down, and he just took one look at me, and he said, have you done this before? And and I'm like,
What gave it away?
I know, no. And he went, right. So, and then he just sort of went through all of the things I needed for my story. And then I went back to the newsroom and I had, the wheres, the whats, the whys. They had a great quote. I mean, obviously, played like a fiddle by an expert because there was no vigorous testing of what Ken had to say. But it was such a lovely thing. And when I was a young reporter, there were a few people like that along the way that were just... I don't know, saw my enthusiasm, I think, and were very kind and kind of gave me a nudge.
When I got approached to do journalism, I was still full on kind of music, right? So I'm touring, and then these two ladies came out, they said, from Māori Television, we want to talk to you about having your own TV show. I said, oh, nah, it's all right, thank you. And they said, oh, can we come and see you? We'll bring dinner. I said, okay. Because I'd done TV before a long time ago. And anyway, they go, yeah, we've got this great idea. And they had all these sort of lookbooky things. And it could be called this show, it could be called after you. And current affairs. Journalism, you can have your own show. What do you think about that? I said, that is the dumbest idea I've heard. No, thank you, but that's not a good idea. I'm not a journalist. And they went, yeah, but that's okay because you've got this life experience in this analysis and we think you'd be really good. Can you please think about it? Anyway, so I sort of went on my tour and all that, and then I was talking to my family and they're thinking, oh, that'll be good. You could actually have like a weekly income, which was a bit of a perk. As a musician, hadn't had one of those since 2004. And then I talked to everybody and they're all going, because I was going, nah, I'm not a journalist. Like her. Like everybody, like Gary Wilson and Tapu Misa and Chris Wikaida and John Campbell and, these people trained. They know it. And anyway, I went on tour and they just kept putting the pressure on. And then I started to think, I wonder if it could be a bit of a challenge. I like a bit of a challenge, So I said, well, I'll do a little pilot. Okay, they went, okay, we're going to bring in this flash executive producer, lovely Colin McRae, who's, he's been trying to retire for years, but they're bringing him back. And he interviewed Lindy Chamberlain and Muhammad Ali and all these neat people. So he was coming in, and then they had all these flash reporters like Wena Harawira, and but I only found out they were freelance. So we were almost like on air, and then they've all got other jobs. Stink bum. Anyway, so I'm touring, and then we had the Zoom. They're like, we want to talk to you. Okay, you're going to start on this date as soon as you get back. And I said, well, what am I going to do? They said, well, we've got an interview set up for you. I said, oh, yeah, okay. Who, what? They went, the Prime Minister. I said, are you nuts? What are you talking about? They said, the Prime Minister, Jacinda. I said, this is just ridiculous. They said, no, if you can survive the Prime Minister, you'll be all right. And so I just was like, majorly panicking. I read through bloody budgets and, research. And then she walks in and I said, oh, hello, what have you been doing today? She goes, I went and launched a Navy ship. That's what she told me. I said, oh. She said, yeah, its name is Manawa Nui. I said, that's the name of my daughter. I think this is going to go well. Yeah, so it was my first interview, and that was my first TV interview. It was enlightening. It gave me a bit of an opportunity to understand my own style, which is to actively listen. Actively listen, not try to interrupt, but sort of know enough so that I could go, well, that's not quite how Māori see it, or whatever. But I'm having a flashback now to my first ever political interview when I used to work in radio, and it was with Winston Peters. You see how traumatised I am now. And you know what was so funny? Because that I actually swatted and I found something. So he might have said something. Say it's just something ridiculous like, Maori didn't come from New Zealand or something, And then, so we're doing this interview, and this is many years ago, and I go, you said that Maori didn't come from New Zealand, Winston. He goes, I never said that. I said, no, you did say that. He goes, you are going to have to apologise to your listeners, Moana, because I never said that. I said, I got your speech here. See, you said that over here. And then we went to a news break, and then he goes, give me that. Oh, no, he goes, so I go, here it is. And he goes, but what I meant, Moana, was, and we went to a news break, and I was like, he said, give me that paper. He took it, and I was just like, what happened there? I had the evidence, and he goes, but what I meant. So, I'm just sitting there all bamboozled. That was my lesson.
He is a great survivor, and I must have spent hundreds of hours, chasing him, waiting for him, interviewing him, whatever, because he's been around for so long. But the funniest thing is, and we had a very, I'd say, volatile relationship when I was at Parliament, and I hadn't seen him for ages, I don't know, it might even be 15 years or longer. And about 2 or so years ago, maybe, I was at a client thing and at a restaurant in Wellington, and I was leaving and walking out the door of the restaurant, and this out of the side of someone said, Linda Clark, and I looked, and it was Winston, and he was at a table with a bunch of others, and so I went up and said, oh, hi Winston, I haven't seen you for a long time, and whatever, congratulations, or whatever he was doing at that time, hard to know, can't remember. And this is the most amazing thing, because we had really gone toe to toe many times, and he grabbed my hand and he stroked my hand and he said, I'm so proud you've gone to the law. So, what can I say? I want to cover off before we stop a couple of things. But one thing this whole business of, because I think it's one thing that we've both got in common is this, we've really we've done something which lots of people don't do, and that is at a decent age, we've kind of risked our reputation, because we had reputations in one field, to forge a path in another. And what do you reckon that you've learnt by doing that?
I've learnt that I like challenges. I like to be useful. So if I can be in a position where I think that I can be useful, then I'll knock myself out and for our people and whatever. Try and have real meaningful conversations, whether it's music, documentaries or journalism. Try and encourage people to have meaningful conversations. And I find it more difficult in journalism now with the kind of current environment, which is very undermining of the role of journalism. I think I'm a little bit obsessive, so late nights, research. I find it hard to say no. I'm trying to, but obviously I fail because I'm here at the bloody Featherston Booktown Festival. But sometimes it works out, eh? And I don't know, I think it's really important to nurture relationships and build relationships and get out there and hear things, hear what people are thinking and feeling and trying to allay some fears. I find it difficult being a very, I find the whole parenting thing a bit difficult, challenging, because I'm always saying to my daughter who's 15, oh, hang on, I'll just do this, hang on, It's quite interesting as a musician. I used to, in the early days, I'd leave my son at home with his grandparents, because I thought that was the best thing to do for your child, give them stability, and you go off around the world and whatever. Then with my daughter, there's 18 years between them. I'd take her everywhere, took her everywhere with us to give her those experiences. But I'm trying not to beat myself up because I'm, not that fabulous at a whole bunch of things. Yeah, I don't know.
Did people say to you, well, actually, when you said to people who know you well, hey, I'm going to do this journalism thing, what did they say?
Oh, they were like, yeah, great.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, cheerleading. Yeah. No, I always had. I've got really great mentors and support around me in terms of people who I bounce off, and they've been in my life for a long time, or they might be recent. But as I was saying, they're across so many areas, law, health, whatever. And I think that's really, really powerful because it informs me. People, I know politicians, I know gang members, I know Indigenous people all the way around the world. So when things happen like, that catastrophe last year or something when America was going to go into Taiwan and everyone's thinking, oh my God, the Chinese are going to go nuts and blah, blah, blah. We just go, oh, I wonder what the Indigenous people of Taiwan think. Interview them. Just another day in the colony, And so we have these relationships that are everywhere. And I think that's really a strength.
You've mentioned a couple of times, and you mentioned it this afternoon, this time in our history where the national conversation is. It's kind of tough. There's some tough things being said. There's the debate is quite divided, opinions quite divided. How do you see Māori leaders, such as yourself, navigating through that? Like, what? First of all, how do you think you will navigate through that?
I'm refusing to participate in debates unless the parties are informed. I can't be bothered. I'm not having anyone on my show talking a load of shite. I'm not doing it. I can't be bothered. It's not fair. It's not fair. So, for example, around the Treaty Principles Bill, we all know what Māori think. I know what Māori think. We think it's atrocious, a rewrite. But what do Pākehā think? What do Pākehā who understand the treaty, who know what it's about, what do they think? What do more conservative Pākehā, like former national party ministers, think about things? So that's why we get in people like Chris Finlayson and Matthew Hooton. What a waste of time us talking amongst ourselves, me and Tummy and Liz. We're all on the same bloody wavelength. That's what Momo te wā. So we get in a Chris, we get in a Matthew. Was this a good idea? No, it's the most ridiculous idea they say. A prudent conservative would be thinking about the unintended consequences of such a radical thing. We get in Asians for tino rangatiratanga. We get in mana moana people. We get in Pākehā allies, tiriti allies. So that a key thing for us, for Māori in this time and for Māori leaders, and I'm not one, I'm just a person being useful in my space, is to build a movement, and it has to be inclusive, and you have to bring in everybody. There's heaps of Pākehā out there that don't like what's going on. Hey, there's heaps of us. Yeah. The environment, the climate, the social deprivation and poverty, everything. So this is how we have to build a movement. We have to all come together and just think about, it sounds like a bloody Beatles song, doesn't it? But it is like the values driven, and we need radical change. And some of that homework has been done. And talk of constitutional transformation, it sounds incredibly academic, but there's stuff out there. And so many Pākehā are locking onto it and thinking, okay, we need to rattle the cage, shake the tree.
So on the day that the bill the Treaty Principles Bill is introduced, because it will be introduced, what do you think will happen?
I think there's going to be a bit of an uprising, and I'm hoping there's going to be more people than less. I am concerned because there is a Minister of Treaty Principles. I think that's his title, isn't it? Something like that. But it is the most clumsy, piece of legislation that could be proposed. There's lots of stuff going on. I think what's a little bit challenging for a lot of us is that there's so many fires to put out. It's exhausting. I get all these notifications from RNZ, this is happening and this bill's going past and these people are all being fired, and you think, oh my God. So it's hard not to be reactionary. We have to kind of learn, and that's what a lot of us are trying to figure out, is how we can mobilise and be proactive and strategise, because a lot of the stuff that's coming out that is freaking everyone out, I think is a distraction from what really bad stuff that's going on.
But that is why your style of interviewing and your program is a kind of a place to have some of those conversations, right? That's one of the that's part of the secret sauce.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just thinking that I went to this Flash conference. I had imposter syndrome there too in Sweden last year. And just a hint to everyone, they don't actually do cash there. So if you lose your phone or your cards, you're stuffed, okay? Anyway, it was a Global Investigative Journalism Conference. And I went there, I was the only one from New Zealand, and I was a guest of the Indigenous Journalism Association that comes out of the States, Native Americans. They brought in Sami and Taiwanese and Hawaiian. And these incredible journalists everywhere. Like listening to these journalists who'd gone into Ukraine and worked with the people who dug up the bodies in the forest in the north and helped to figure out who the Russian commander was who'd ordered this massacre. Listening to people talk about things going on in Nigeria and how they had trained up a young law student to go in and film stuff and record things, and how he changed the storyline to actually ask why these massacres were happening up there. It was so incredible. This one panel that I really wanted to go to was with this woman, Carol Codwalder. I think that's her name, from The Guardian. I'd seen that film on Cambridge Analytica. Okay? She's neat. So she was up on the stage with this other lady who'd investigated Bolsonaro and found out all this stuff. And then somebody else who was like really amazing. I'm sitting there listening, soaking it all up. And anyway, someone asked, they talked about how social media and all these tech giants, there was these kind of collusions going on, and different companies that were paying things to get messages out there, to get people to not vote, and it's all so dark. And then somebody goes, Carol, what should we do? And she goes, pray. I thought, oh my God. Anyway, I came up outside. I went, oh, excuse me, kia ora, I'm Moana, friend from New Zealand. And she goes, New Zealand? I know, my boys have been down there, New Zealand. I said, oh. She goes, New Zealand first, Winston Peters. Honestly, the Brexit guys had a relation. One of them got stuck down here during COVID and was looking online and thought, I like what he stands for. And the next minute, the language started to change, woke and all this sort of stuff. So the message that came out of that conference was just all these different forces that were going on that were undermining democracy, but also the role of journalism, how important that was, and how if we build these relationships around the world, we can actually share stuff and learn stuff from each other. So I found that very illuminating, and it helped to join the dots about why some things are happening here. Indigenous people being disconnected from their role as kaitiaki. The treaty doesn't matter. We don't want the treaty. We don't want the treaty. Well, if you don't have the treaty, you don't have that relationship as Indigenous people with the land, it means it's a free-fall. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it actually is a conspiracy to disconnect Indigenous people from their duties and obligations. I heard that from people in Canada, in the States, in Nepal, in the Philippines. So, yeah.
Okay, I hate to cut you off.
Sorry, I'm just going blah, blah now, sorry.
But we're out of time. This is a book festival. And
books.
We haven't talked about books. So we'll just have one last question, because then that'll show that we've stayed to the theme. We've added something to the festival, perfectly. So, books. Would you ever write a memoir?
I did write a book.
I know you wrote a journal.
Did I?
Well, are you talking about the colonial?
Oh, yeah, I did that, yeah. No, I wrote a book. I wrote a book called, but I only did 50 copies. I did Under the Apple Tree. I interviewed my father and my mother and all their siblings.
Nice.
And I tell you, it was amazing. And I'd recommend that anyone do that, because then I put all that whakapapa in there, and I got all the photographs. I got a flash artist to put it all together.
Could you turn it into like a book that others would read, though? Ever tempted?
Oh,
you've got a hell of a lot of stories, girl.
I have got, yeah, I have. Because I'm old, and so I've got lots of stories that are kind of in there, and there's a lot of fascinating stories here. I don't know, I've been asked to do that. That might be my next thing. Yeah.
Hey, you have been a fantastic audience. The two takeaways from tonight are: please stay involved in your community, stay connected and talking to each other, and listen to other people's stories all of the time. Please also support local journalism, because it really needs you. It needs you to read it, click on it, watch it. Please look out for your local stories and the journalists that work in your communities. Mary, you run a great festival, and thank you so much. So thank you to all of the volunteers. Thank you to be all of you in Moana.
Linda Clark. Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much.